Good morning and welcome to Ghana Short. Ghana Short में आप सबका स्वागत है. Oh, we've recently had the SCO meet, and post the SCO meet, there was a great military parade. Now the SCO meet and the military parade had a few more additional content. One, the fact was that there was a summit meeting between President Xi Jinping and Prime Minister Modi, which was a highlight one day before the SCO meet. One day after the SCO meet, there was a meeting, again a summit meeting between President Putin and President Xi Jinping. And then the military parade happened. And more interestingly, the military parade had 26 heads of states, right, including Kim Jong-un. A lot of signals, a lot of issues came to the fore at the SCO meet. There was this angle of, the Ukraine war, because during the SCO meet, before that, President Zelensky spoke to Prime Minister Modi about how to, use his good offices to speak with President Putin and get the Ukraine war to a closure. Then there was the issue of India-China. Then there was a huge issue of signaling to Mr. Trump and the US establishment and the West in general that India has other options. And then there's this mega issue of, Russia, China, India triangle, will it emerge or not? Then the Tianjin Declaration came in with all its complexities. A whole lot of things have happened. And I thought we must discuss this from two perspectives. One, the Russian perspectives, which Dr. John Helmer will give us. And one, the Indian perspective, which Brig Arun Sahgal will give us. And we're going to have these two, gentlemen with a lot of experience who are going to explain all these things to us. With this, let me first welcome both of them. John and Sahgal, sir, welcome to Ghana Short once again.
Thank you.
I've outlined what we're going to speak. I'll leave it to you what you feel is important in this huge canvas to speak the way you want. Make out your opening statements and your opening views, and then we'll take it up from there. I'll start with John. John, all yours. Carry on. Give us the Russian perspective, because I do understand certain things have happened after this in the past 24 hours, and the Americans have started acting, acting and reacting. So all yours.
Well, thank you for having me again, Ravi. Let's start with that famous old Texan expression about individuals who are all hat and no cattle. All hat, no cattle.
No cattle.
Is the SCO an example of effective collective border security? Is it an effective collective decision-making group that advances the interests of each and all? Do all share the same objectives? Now, if we look at it that way, one could make a couple of generalizations to start with. First of all, the SCO is a major rebuff to President Trump, although he has tried to play that part down. Second, in the finer detail, you can see that the three Trump representatives, if you like, some people might call them the three Trump stooges at the SCO in Tianjin, were Shehbaz Sharif of Pakistan, Nikol Pashinyan of Armenia, and in fact, Recep Tayyip Erdogan of Turkey. When you look carefully at what they said and tried to do and what they failed to do, you can see a significant failure on the part of these individuals. For example, everyone in India has seen the viral video clip of Prime Minister Sharif chasing after President Putin in an attempt to shake his hand. What you can't see because there's no viral video was the extent to which he was ignored. And that's a very significant signal of a Chinese type that that Pakistan and its representative there, and General Munir, who wasn't there, or Marshal Munir, who wasn't there, that the Chinese now regard Pakistan as having switched strategically. But you'll be able to say much more about that than me now. The Prime Minister of Armenia made a very peculiar statement attacking the president of Azerbaijan for calling the new road corridor between Azerbaijan and Nakhichevan a part of its territory. Instead of calling it by its geographical name, Pashinyan said it had to be, which is Zangezur, it had to be called by its Trump name. That's the Trump route for international peace and prosperity, the TRIP. In other words, Pashinyan was reflecting a loyalty to Trump, which was out of place and was snubbed accordingly. Those are two minor losers. Recep Tayyip Erdogan made a speech he's a partner, he's not yet a member of SCO, in which he failed to endorse sovereignty for Syria. And that's a very important point. Syria is not mentioned. This is a group of countries, starting with the original Shanghai Five, and now I believe they're up to 9 or 10 with multiple partner countries and some observer countries, with the principal original aim of reducing border conflicts, anticipating border conflicts, and resolving border conflicts. Now, Turkey invaded Syria using proxies, using, let's call them terrorists, but there's, and so did Israel. And the Syrian territory has now been partitioned into three: an Israeli section, a Turkish section, and an American section. But there's no reference to Syria in the very large Tianjin declaration. Why not? It means that there are members of the SCO, attenders of the summit in Tianjin, who are making war on across their own borders as they're trying to sign a communique saying they won't do that. It's not simply Turkey and Syria. It's not simply Azerbaijan and Armenia. We can refer to the fact that Cambodia was participating, Myanmar was participating. There's no reference to the Thai attack on Cambodia. There was no minimal reference to the various troubles besetting Myanmar around its borders. So, you know, we have to see the outcome as a communique. It is a kind of catalogue of failure in certain respects. Now, from a Russian point of view, the stinging accusation has come from Kiev that Russia failed to get the Ukraine war mentioned in the communique. And that indeed is what happened. It contrasts very sharply with the success of the Indian side in getting Pahalgam mentioned explicitly. And not only Pahalgam, but the terrorist attacks on Jaffa Express in 2025 and in Khuzda in May. So the Indian side were very effective in getting their priority conflicts, cross-border conflicts with Pakistan, in the communique. Russia was not comparably effective. Why? Arguably, they didn't try too hard to put Ukraine in because the Chinese side, as chairman, told them to keep it out. And instead, the Russian side accepted vaguer language, which reflects Russian objectives in the special military operation in the Ukraine. For example, the member state condemnation of terrorism in all its forms and manifestations and cross-border terrorism is a Russian attribution, let's say, for many of the kinds of attacks the Ukraine is currently on Russia. In Russia, that's called terrorism. And so to some degree, The condemnation of terrorism was explicit for India, but implied for Russia. There's a Russian hand in the member state condemnation of Nazism, neo-Nazism, of the glorification of Nazism. But that's underlined in a kind of Chinese style by reference to a UN General Assembly resolution. It's a very soft way of referring to one of Russia's war objectives in the Ukraine, denazification. There's more. The Tianjin Declaration explicitly condemns Israel for attacking Iran, but doesn't dare to use the word genocide for the Israeli attack on Gaza. Exactly why that has occurred goes to the characterization I started with: all hat and no cattle. Why not be specific? Who opposed the use of the term genocide? Russia does not like the word genocide. That's President Putin and the foreign ministry do not use the word genocide when applying to Israel's destruction of the Palestinians and of Gaza. There are a couple of other issues I can highlight from a Russian point of view that were positives, again, but indirectly reflecting Russia's war aims. There's a condemnation of attacks on nuclear facilities in the Tianjin Declaration. The member states agreed I'm looking at my notes, looking at the text, agreed on that nuclear safety and protection of nuclear facilities must be ensured at all times, including during military conflicts, to protect people and the environment for harm. To this end, member states reaffirmed their commitment to resolving current issues peacefully through diplomatic efforts. Now, if you want to see an example of hat no cattle, that's the sentence, isn't it? From a Russian point of view, there's been consistent, repeated attacks by the Ukrainians on the Zaporozhye nuclear power plant. And there's been no international support from the IAEA to stop it. There's been no doubt that the Ukrainian attack in Kursk region aimed at capturing the nuclear power plant there. So while the Russian side has carefully avoided attacking nuclear power plants inside the Ukraine at the point at which the nuclear reaction is taking place, and therefore would release nuclear radiation, concentrating instead on the distribution of electricity, what you see here is a wishy-washy reflection of Russian concerns that the Ukraine has in fact consistently pursued as a war aim attacks on nuclear weapons. And finally, there are two other points that are soft and could have been a lot harder if Russia pushed and China didn't object. First place, Russia's been the target of the allegation that it uses a nerve agent called Novichok to kill people in England or to kill Alexei Navalny, who had to fly to Germany for safe haven. You can see at the bottom of my name up there, the new book that I've just put out. Unfortunately,
very nice.
It's in German. And it's in German because the principal narrative of Novichok as a war weapon from Putin is a German preparation for German war against Russia, as Novichok in England was a preparation of public narrative for war against Russia on the English side. Now, during that whole process, the OPCW, the International Organization for Prevention of Prohibition of Chemical Warfare, based in The Hague, has acted as a rubber stamp for the US, for the Europeans in pursuing anti-Syrian, anti-Russian, anti-Iranian line. And the best that the Tianjin Declaration can say about that is member states call on all parties to the Chemical Weapons Convention to fully implement the convention and make it an effective legal instrument in the field of disarmament. Member states reaffirm their support for the Organization for the Prohibition of Chemical Weapons, that's OPCW, and support the organization, now listen to this, in resolving internal differences through consensus-based decision-making to ensure its effective operation in accordance with the convention. Now, you don't have to be a literary critic. You don't have to be altogether blind to understand that that's the softest possible way that the Russian side and the Iranian side could get their colleagues in SCO to accept that OPCW has been a weapon against them. And if that's the best they can do, who softened it? Well, I think the evidence is China softened it. And the second, or my last point about the SCO declaration, the communique, is sanctions. Obviously, it's a major Russian negotiating issue with the Americans, one we can come back to later if you want. And it's obviously a very sensitive issue for India because it's being punished by 50% secondary sanctions for trading with Russian oil. This is the best that this group could come up with. And I'm quoting again. Member states oppose unilateral coercive measures, including economic measures that violate the UN Charter and other norms of international law, as well as the principles and rules of the World Trade Organization. These measures harm international security interests, such as food security and energy security, blah, blah, blah. Look, summing up, because I don't want to take time from you, this has all the earmarks of no cattle, except for some of the specific bilateral achievements. India's achievement in getting this communique to be explicit when it failed to do that 3 months ago at the foreign ministers meeting, and the significant bilateral achievements that the Russian side negotiated with the Chinese side, starting with some finalized agreement on Power of Siberia 2. That's the new expanded gas pipeline that will cross from Russia, Mongolia into China. Now, that's been an argument that's been going on for years. It's been an argument over method of pricing the gas and whether it should be market principles, spot pricing, how it should be connected to oil, and how it should be linked to the other measures in the energy market, like the dollar. And second, there have been some arguments over the routing, depending on which country you come from, through Mongolia or elsewhere. Now, President Putin gave in his press conference in Beijing a few hours ago a very clear endorsement that pricing and routing were some of the problems. But, and we come back to the point at which I began, this is a major failure for the American side because it has basically helped drive China and Russia to bury their differences and bury the gas pipeline, which is a major, let's say, defense against the coercive measures of sanctions. So there are some pluses, there are some minuses. There are more hats than cattle.
More heads than cattle. That's very nice. Well, you outlined a lot of things. I think we need to shift. Say, what did SEO give India, or what did SEO get out of India, and what are the larger implications of SEO for India and the larger world? Sahgal sir, all yours.
Thank you very much. Thank you, John. You outlined very vividly the Russian position. Let me now talk a bit about how India looks at it. For India, SEO meeting was a God-sent opportunity. It came up at a time when India was under pressure by the Americans on the whole issue of tariffs. There was this whole narrative of which was being played out about oil buying from Russia, and there was this pressure even building up from its European allies. So the point to note from Indian perspective was that it allowed India to showcase alternatives to the United States, and it allowed it to reconnect with RIC not as as a functional concept, but as a overall concept that three Eurasian powers can come together and create a new global order, at least on the continental space of Eurasia, to be able to challenge, not so much challenge in terms of military challenge, but economic and energy and political challenges to to Europe, and through Europe to the United States. So, in a sense, with the kind of relationship United States has with Europe at this particular point in time, which is touchy at the moment, the coming together of these three major powers in Eurasia was a clear-cut signal to United States of its declining power and influence. That's issue one. The issue two is it also indicates a shifting global strategic balance of power. That it will never remain a Atlantis, U.S. Atlantis power centric world. It has alternatives, and those alternatives are emerging. Now, if you, from India's perspective, there was other elements at play. One of the major elements was that instead of going directly to China for a visit, the, this provided an opportunity to the Prime Minister to have a power with the Chinese at the highest level, to understand where the relationship stands and how to go about improving and mending this relationship. Please note, this came when, after the visit of Foreign Minister Wangi, who came up with some very positive suggestions, 10-point plan for border demarcation, no, not sorry, delineation, and then other positive issues came up, right, removing those sanctions, or the controls that they have put up on the rare earths, heavy machinery, and fertilizers, etc. So the whole idea basically at this time was to seek out the Chinese and to reaffirm relationship at the highest level with the Russians. So, from India's perspective, this was a great opportunity which was highly leveraged by the Prime Minister. The fact is that Chinese were, I would say, from the language, from the body language, the way the Prime Minister was handled, and the way the two leaders met, and the following statements that have occurred. Although, mind you, in the statements there are some differences, I'll just come to that. But the point is that was a great degree of positivity and desire to, at least while we sort out the boundary issue, and there was this move forwards in terms of delimitation, let us now start focusing on broader, bigger issues on cooperation, that is economic cooperation, opening up of each other's economy, opening up people to people contact, uh, uh, starting flight services, etc. The whole idea is that India is now trying to look at China as an alternative source of investments and trade, and seeking Chinese investments into India. My personal view is that if we can create a 300 to 400 billion dollar trade, including high level Chinese investments in India, we would have created a certain degree of commonalities of interest, which will then define their own momentum in terms of keeping the borders and other issues under control. In my view, even if we have the 300 and 400 billion dollars of investments, even the Pakistani factor, the CPEC factor, the factor of the trade will dominate the geopolitics of the region. The short point is that. So that's the issue. So I think India is now looking to suss out uh, the opportunities that are available to us in China. The important perspective also was that he met the chief of staff of Kaiki
Side cheese.
Saichi during this meeting. Now, meeting with Saichi, who is, if you see him, he's always in all meetings with Xi Jinping, he's on his right side. And you are aware, General Shankar and John, that how important player he is in policy system, not in the party system that much, in carrying out the wishes of Xi Jinping. So so what I'm seeing from these developments is that we are going to see uh, opening of Indian economy, opening of the Chinese economy. We have $100 billion deficit with the Chinese at this point in time, but I'm sure, and India will insist that Chinese economy must open up and this deficit is reduced at least from $100 billion to about $60 billion. We should get about a $40 to $50 billion trade. There are reports which are talking about that if we really mean business, the two countries, it can go up to close to about $160 billion worth of opening up of the Chinese economy. So what this whole issue is looking at is paring down of tensions between India and China at one level in the boundary issue, secreting economic opportunities, and India is also then getting a chance to recalibrate its supply chains and its investments from the West till such time United States continues to be a dog in the manger and punishing us with coercive sanctions of 50%. So my point, from that perspective, I think Prime Minister gained a lot, and it was important that he had this meeting. As far Mr. Putin is concerned, he was conscious of the impact of the 25% punitive sanctions because of oil. I am given to understand that certain further concessions were given to India, and in that about $3 to $7 per barrel concessions were given to India, which has further helped to India to overcome some of these issues. And in addition, there are some critical items, particularly on the strategic as well as on the higher technical conventional space, which were discussed and where the discussions are going to go on. And so, bottom line is the the opportunities that India got at this particular juncture at the SCO meeting these two leaders was important from Indian perspective to cover the gaps that have occurred in our trade and transit, cover the gaps in our supply chains, and create new areas and seek new areas of opportunity and investments, particularly in close to our neighborhood. So that's one aspect. The second aspect was that it was expected that there might be some kind of a handshake or a rapprochement, indication of rapprochement with Shabazz Sharif being present over there. But it was the manner in which the Prime Minister ignored him, or in the manner in which he decided not to even shake his hand, indicates that the position in India are hardening vis-a-vis the Pakistan is concerned, and India is in no mood to to bend to even the United States-led logic of improving relationship with Pakistan, and also the fact is that we managed to get that strong indictment of terrorism in terms of Pahalgam attack. That was a major achievement. You rightly said it did not happen during the defense ministers meeting, but it certainly happened at this time, and for that, all credit should go to Indian diplomacy and Indian political leadership. Another element was the Prime Minister did not meet the Turkish president. To my understanding, he did not meet him. So he is clearly indicating the Indian position on these issues. Now the issue comes about is what are the dynamics at play vis-a-vis the Americans? The way the American media has reacted to the pictures of these three leaders of Asia coming together is hilarious. CNN is talking about how can West overlook this? This is a new development that is taking place. There's, we are being sidelined in the global system. Look what Mr. So, in my personal view, is the manner in which the some of the senior European leaders, the Finnish president, prime minister, who's the golfing partner
Hubs,
of uh, Trump,
hubs.
So the point is, a pressure is pressure is building up on the American administration to recalibrate its thinking, particularly overall on tariffs, but most importantly is that Indian U.S. India relationship is far too important to be treated in the cavalier manner in which the Trump is treating, and the voices are increasing. But let me now point out a major dilemma for India. India is straddled between these two camps. There is a Russia-China combined, distinct combined, irrespective of their own cultural perspective, but they are joined on the hip for political, economic, and trade reasons. And as far as India is concerned, India, while it wants to be seen as a good Asian power, it has invested heavily over the last 25 years to align itself with the West. And the United States of America was a partner of choice. And we have got 53 odd uh, agreements or various kinds of cooperative arrangements going on with the Americans. And as I speak, we have signed a 99 engine order for 404. There's an exercise is going on. Yuddha Bhyas is going on. There's another exercise with the Air Force which is going on. We had a visit of an American president's well informal envoy, gentleman called Ravi Singh, come to Delhi, who had a discussion with the people, sussing out what the attitudes in Delhi are. And then we also had the Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense, Andrew, who came here to carry on the. So, problem over here is this: how does India manage? At one level, India cannot have a complete break from the United States. Investments have been too high, systems have been gone. We have already part of a large amount of our supply chain. The American companies are keen to invest. Like I sent a data on the other day on this thing. The the Twitters, the Metas, the Googles, and all are making a huge amount of profit and investments in India. So India cannot, well, dealing itself from United States. The United States has to be an important partner, and we have to manage this relationship. This brings it to a question: is how do we manage the relationship with China and investments of China? To my answer to a lot of naysayers who are questioning this logic of India being between two stools, the answer is very simple. Like United States is imposing tariffs, technology restrictions on China, and yet wanting to have a trade with the Chinese, we have to do the same thing. We have to compartmentalize our relationships between these two and work on both the relationships, our Chinese relationship, our Russian relationship, our American relationship. compartmentalize them, and work on them in separate spheres. United States, please understand, has a huge problem, not so much about oil from India, but United States has a huge problem of weapons from Russia. They are, wherever you go, whatever you do, the reasons why there are delays, why there are things, they are wanting end users commitments, all kinds of this data protection laws. The whole idea behind the Americans basically is that they are very, very scared of their technologies passing out. And number two is they are keen that India should more and more be dependent on the Americans. But from Indian perspective, my last point is from Indian perspective, what has happened with to us on the trade deal and the way the senior cabinet ministers of the Trump administration have been abusing India and brutalizing India, I think it's not going to be easy to bridge that gap. So the other day, only yesterday, I think there's this article between Jake Sullivan and Kurt Campbell on how to build up India as an ally, or rebuild its credibility as a partner. So I said there'll be two issues that if India and United States have to come, we have to sign a prenuptial agreement. We have to sign a prenuptial agreement. We have to be very clear what is our strategic positions as far as partnerships are concerned. We have to define. We have not defined it. We took it for granted. We never defined the ideation of what is strategic partnership. And the second issue is we'll have to sleep in the different bedrooms. What basically I'm trying to say is you have to understand my commitments, my space, and you have to look at your space. Thank you very much. I'll stop here.
Thanks a lot, both of you. You covered a huge canvas. If I may sum it up, the SEO operated at two levels. As a SEO, I don't think we can, make out that it's not achieved anything. The SEO per se didn't achieve anything great, right? The charter of the SEO, borders, whatever. But individually, I think Russia, India, and China, all three have achieved quite a bit in their own way. And each has its own bean count. I mean, for example, China has used this to project its power and project it as an alternative entity to USA. Russia has secured its space, right? Mr. Putin, the way he, after meeting Trump at Alaska, then he's been able to come here, have a very good project, a very cordial relationship with India and Mr. Modi, has also be on an equal footing with Xi Jinping, and seal the power Siberia too. So Russia has achieved certain issues in that direction, and India has, as we have spoken. I think from a institutional point of view, SEO has not achieved much, but individual countries, hell of a lot. So now, as far as Pakistan is concerned, I thought Pakistan was ignored by everyone. It was ignored by Russia, it was ignored by India, and it was ignored by China also. In fact, the way China has behaved with Pakistan, China felt that Pakistan had switched camps. So to that extent. Now, to put things in perspective, you see not Russia, USA has reacted absolutely, I wouldn't say, probably even violently towards whatever's happened in the SEO meet. The way Russia, petulant, whatever you call it, sir. Because there are about every channel I saw in the West, and whether it's a reaction from Australians or a reaction from the Finnish, whether it's a reaction from the Brits or whether it's a reaction from UK, whether it was from Fox News or whoever, for them, the very idea that India can go towards China and Russia together and form some kind of a alliance. They call it an alliance when it's not an alliance so far. In fact, the Russia, India, China triangle is far from anywhere near reality. So has sent fever chills up their spines. So I think they will react, and even Trump has started reacting, and that's where it is. But there are certain realities for India, Russia, and China. This RIC, I don't think is anywhere in the horizon. For a long time to come, we'll have to play bilaterally and move things on a bilateral basis rather than
What I said.
multilateral basis.
Absolutely.
That will not happen. We can't, for from an Indian perspective, we can't ignore the depth of our relationship with USA. From an Indian perspective, I don't think we cannot give up in the depth of relationship with Russia. In fact, the answer is to increase it. From India China perspective, while the intent is great to open up the economy and all that, I don't think things are going to be easy, because the Chinese have, if you see the fundamental writings of the Chinese, their aim is to ensure that India does not progress and India remains, one notch lesser than Chinese in all respects. And India cannot grow at China's expense. And they feel that any investment into India will be at their own expense. So there is a complex issue which is coming up here. I mean, that has to be understood. Uh, the trade deficit, they're not going to give up. So there are huge issues, and we can't, it's easy to say that we open up trade with China, but there are problems within the trade itself, and then the issue of the border, which is quite emotive in the populace. It has political ramifications, so we'll see where it goes. Now, where does that leave Russia? Why I'm getting to Russia, John? I'd like your view. Where does Russia see itself, or where do you think Russia should go ahead? Because considering the fact that Russia has to maintain its relations with China, as also India, at the same time, the Ukraine war is on, and there is some pressure from USA on Russia. There would be some pressure from EU also on Russia and Europe as a whole to take it to a closure. And how do you think this is going? Also, the second factor on this is, apart from the fact that President Zelensky has spoken to Prime Minister Modi, to speak to probably President Putin, to see how to take the Ukraine war to a closure. Yesterday, even from the EU, Ursula von der Leyen, she's spoken to a prime minister to see how to get this war to a closure. So now I see a shift from the war, mediation to get the war to a close, shifting from Trump to Prime Minister Modi. Where do you see all this going from a Russian perspective? Then we'll get to the Indian perspective a little later.
Thanks for the cue, Ravi. Let me come back to the very important metaphor that Arun introduced, because it's attractive, but I don't agree with it. To suggest that the relationship between India and the United States going forward should be formulated on the part in two parts: one, a prenuptial agreement, and second, sleeping in different bedrooms, carries some unfortunate implications of who's to play the man and who's to play the woman, if we're to be gender oriented. And
No.
I don't see any prospect, not for India, not for China, not for Russia, that the Trump administration or the broader successors like Vance, let's call it the MAGA constituency, the Make Empire Great Again constituency, have any readiness to accept equality of responsibility and reciprocal security. This was, from a Russian point of view, reciprocal indivisible security was the original plan that Russia tabled back in December 2021 as an offer to the United States. No country's security should be advanced at the expense of anyone else. And that applies not only, and Russia has said it, and it's in the Tianjin Declaration as well. It not only applies in Europe, it applies in Asia, it applies in the Middle East and in the Americas. The United States aims to be the dominant alpha male, if you want to use that term, and it will not accept prenuptial obligations in Arun's formulation as a restriction on its action. Rather, as we've said before and discussed, it's aiming to apply maximum force where it meets weakest resistance. It thought it was achieving that when it attacked Iran. That was a failure. It claims to have had that effect in making Trump's claim to have made peace between Pakistan and India. We don't need to argue that. Your audience understands that was a fake. The entire American orientation towards the Nobel Peace Prize is in fact a cover for what we term sequencing wars, applying maximum American capacity where they're most likely to be effective, avoiding any conflict where their military capabilities are likely to face loss. Losing war is what the American administration, the Trump administration, is trying to avoid in Europe, but not give up war, not give up escalation control and escalation dominance. The US has had 100-year war. The US, the British, and the Europeans, especially the Germans, have had 100-year war against Russia since 1917, and earlier, if you like, in the 19th century, in the British case. We are facing, and I think it would be fair to say, though the Russians don't say it explicitly, we are facing another 100-year war to break up and destroy Russia, as the last 100-year war was aimed to do, only it failed. Now, the US empire role, or the US hegemon, depending on which ideological school you grow up in, using different terms. The American position is never to lose and always to maximize its dominance. Now, that's not that prenuptial agreements and sleeping in different beds is not a deal. In fact, you can see even the way in which the United States treats its girlfriends. Let's say Canada. It's Trump throwing its girlfriend out of the bed. It's not a case of allowing Canada or even Australia or the other girlfriends, the other close allies, to have anything like the level of equality that a prenuptial agreement implies. On the other hand, death, which is after all death or divorce is what a prenuptial agreement deals with. Death and divorce are Trumpian goals to be inflicted on friends if they don't comply, and on enemies if they can be defeated. So from my point of view, the Russian view is, in the one hand, achieving an end to the Ukraine war is going to be military. Second, and it will be slow. And third, it will be temporary, because after the Ukraine, the Europeans will not be deterred, the Germans will not be deterred from remilitarizing. And the US wants to encourage a sequencing of warfare preparations on platforms outside of the Ukraine battlefield, Poland, Finland, and so on, the Baltic states and so on. These are new platforms for continuing the war and making sure that for the politicians in charge in each of these countries, they are not seen to lose the war. And for those factions in those countries, Germany, England, France, and so on, and in the United States, this continuation of the war should be profitable, highly profitable for their constituencies. It's one element of American thinking, which the Russian side is not having illusions about. The second part of American thinking is remilitarizing the domestic political structure of the United States. What you've seen is the creation of a new federal police force called ICE. What you're seeing is the remilitarizing of law and order in the cities principally where Democrats will vote against Trump or the Republican Party in the midterms next year and in the presidential election of 2028. So Los Angeles, Washington D.C. are already targeted. Chicago's next. Now, remilitarizing or militarizing domestically and remilitarizing on foreign terms, where the U.S. side profits from each of these adventures, but never is seen to lose. That's the policy that the Russian side has to deal with. But at the same time, President Putin emphasizes in the short term, there's an opportunity to establish to what degree President Trump can be persuaded or dissuaded from his courses of action that are adverse to Russia. To what extent can he be bribed through the bribe operators, Stephen Witkoff, Howard Lutnick, Scott Bessent, and others? What combination of money and dangerous military force can persuade the Trump group that they should not intensify or escalate in the Ukraine? So President Putin has just said and has explained that he had told Prime Minister Modi and everybody else that in Anchorage, he is convinced that President Trump now understands the Russian positions, the short term, the long term. In addition, he's convinced that that meeting was useful in laying out the bribes, the inducements, the foreign trade, the possibility of U.S. return to Russia, oil fields in Sakhalin and so forth, if in exchange there's a relaxation of the sanctions war. I mean, just take that as an example and apply it to the Indian problem. If we now know that the Rosneft chief, Igor Sechin, met with ExxonMobil in the UAE recently to discuss the possibility of ExxonMobil recovering or retrieving or reclaiming its production and profit-making rights at the Sakhalin-1 oil field in the Russian Far East. But the conditionality was ExxonMobil has to prove that it can lobby effectively to reduce the sanctions on Russia, which in turn would mean the sanctions on India and other countries for trading with Russia. The kicker is, here's where we get back to prenuptial agreements. If ExxonMobil can't do more than hold hands with Igor Sechin and then not deliver the reduction of sanctions, warfare in Washington, there's no Russian deal. No Russian deal. So if that's a model for how the Russian side is approaching a combination of, if you like, sticks and carrots, that's a model of how the Russian side aims to deal with an empire. Only some Russian factions in Moscow don't like empire talk. They grew up with a very clear Leninist, Stalinist, and Marxist understanding of what empires are and how they expand and so forth. They think that they've had their whole life of fighting against that sort of doctrine. And now they're having to learn that sometimes reality is Marxist. Sometimes the situation on the ground is imperialist. And so they, rather than use the word imperialist, they use the word hegemonic. It means the same thing, and it means no deal. Or, to be better, be more precise, it means in the short term there's opportunities, in the long term there are not. So you can't do anything in the short term that would prejudice or disadvantage you in relation to your imperial enemy. You can't do anything in your short term that would disadvantage you in the medium and long term. So a skillful politician, a skillful general knows how to take tactical decisions that don't disadvantage and will advantage operational and strategic goals. You know that better than I do. So that's the Russian position. And it looks contradictory, perhaps, to the naive or to the partisans or the gung-ho audience. But it's a realistic requirement of realistic politicians, yours, Indian, Russian, and Chinese. Does
Okay.
that answer your question?
Yeah, thanks a lot.
Can I
You-
pitch in for a
yeah,
moment?
1 minute. Yes, sir, please. Okay, go ahead, sir.
No, go ahead. Go ahead.
Yeah, please go ahead. Please go ahead.
Okay. So, John, I heard you with great deal of attention. I have a slightly contra thesis. And my contra thesis is essentially built upon there is a central perception of American power and influence in all your discourse. And that central power and influence is at the center of what is happening around and what positions other people are taking. My view is the United States central power and influence is shaky. It is shaky in Europe because it can't get a deal, it can't get peace. Europeans are concerned about the long-term consequences of this war. They are not happy with the way the Russians are playing the game. The way the Russians are now asking for security guarantees. If you see today's New York Times, they are also asking security guarantees. But the fact of the matter is, in this game, is becoming more and more Eurocentric, in which the two players are Russia and Europe. And Europeans are also not talking about forgetting NATO, but separate countries of Europe giving guarantees to Ukraine and putting troops over there. Okay, so what I'm trying to suggest is that the centrality of American power and influence to dictate the politics of Europe, in my view, is contested. It's not undermined, but it is contested. The same situation is happening in Indo-Pacific. United States power and influence is contested. Same situation is happening in Eurasia. United States power and influence is contested. Same thing is happening in Middle East. Power and influence is contested. And lastly, so is it in South Asia. So the point at issue is the leaders of these countries are understanding the whole position, is saying, what are we going to do? And yet, each one of these separately is linked to the hip with, in some form or the other, with Americans. Does that give the Americans power and influence to dictate? Somewhat. Is it adequate? May not be. Now, taking the Indian tariff as an example, if I was playing the game from the Indian side, is okay, I'll go for a kill. Yeah? You have done what you have done. You landed 50% punitive sanctions on me. You are just trying to destroy my industry, trying to destroy my small scale industry. You're putting my people out of job. But I am fighting back. I need 5 to 10 years. I'm looking at opportunities. I see opportunities in my neighborhood with China. I see opportunities in Russia. I went to Japan. It's talking about a $10 billion worth of investments. We're talking to Southeast Asian countries. We had a Singapore Prime Minister over here the other day. We're talking to European Union. So what I'm trying to do is enhancing my options. So once I have reached a certain degree of perception in my mind of my enhanced options, that's the time I'm going to ask United States, I'm going to have a deal with the United States. And it's not going to be a tariff deal in which we give 50% discount. I said yesterday in another podcast, I said the maximum India will offer in terms of tariffs is 10%, period. 10% should be our last bottom line. If you accept it, great. And that's prenuptial agreement. If United States believes India is important, and India is not important for India's sake. India is important from the way the Eurasian landmass, how the whole power balance is shifting, in which India is trying to play its cards. So when people say, "No, I will not do this with China, I will not do with Russia, I will not do with this," no, 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 no. As a net assessor, we have to play the trend lines and play the options. So when I look at these options from this perspective, I see that whatever happens, and if I solidify my position and I'm reasonably sure I can overcome this tempest, then I will, whenever I have to have an understanding with the United States from here onwards, I will not mean I will seek concessions on terms that are suitable to me, and I'm not going to give in to natural. I should not. I mean, I'm not in Indian government, but Indian government should stand fast. So when I make this statement, I don't make it loosely for this thing, but I'm trying to explain my rationale. So what is happening is this, and then there is this whole notion of SEO was, it's a congregation of a large number of people, and each one of them who came there had some kind of an attraction to this whole concept. SEO just became a trademark, but it was just a collection of people who wanted an alternative global system away from being dominated by Euro-Atlantis alliances who have been doing this for donkey's years and reaping huge benefits without producing anything and leveraging their banking systems and other institutions which they created during after the Second World War. So this is the logic which I am coming at. So my simple word is that now that we have entered into the cesspool, we are in the puddle. We cannot come out with this puddle without gaining our self-respect, gaining our economic independence, and ensuring that a more equitable deals are struck between us and the interlopers who have put us into that situation. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, sir. John, you have anything to say before I wrap it up?
Well, I think this is such an interesting discussion. I have quite a lot to say, but we're running out of time. On the Arun and I don't disagree, and I couldn't quite see how he disagreed with me. But let's just say that
I didn't disagree with you. I'm giving you my point of view. Sorry, I will not.
no. It wouldn't matter to. The more we disagree, the clearer we could make it. But on the one point that you made that's very important, is the U.S. empire, is U.S. policy shaking? Is it shaky in those regions? My approach to this is from having come from a family that grows olives, used to grow olives. I've come from a region where I've planted olive trees in a region that had very old ones. With an olive tree, you have to make sure that the roots go very deep and wide, so that the freeze that can come cannot kill the roots of the tree, and that the wind that blows can't blow it out of its ground. On the other hand, one of the ways when I was a kid we used to pick olives was shake the tree. I don't know how people pick olives these days, but shaking the tree to draw the fruit onto the ground and then pick up the fruit was the way in which we picked olives. You can only shake a tree without destroying it if its root ball is ancient, firm, solid, and healthy. Now, what we're talking about here is that the US is no longer healthy domestically. I think one could probably agree with that. from an American point of view, from a domestic point of view. And the more President Trump says how healthy he is, which is very funny, I just got to say parenthetically that President Putin cracked a remarkable joke in Beijing when asked yesterday, what did he and President Trump have to say when they were in the car together at Anchorage? And Putin said, I had to speak in broken English, but what I said to President Trump, and we only spoke for 30 seconds, was, it's very good to see you here, dear neighbor, so healthy and alive. Now, that's a joke. It's a joke after 3 days of intense US speculation about how seriously ill Trump might have been, and forced Trump to have to say, here I am alive. What President Putin said was a joke. Now, what's not a joke for domestic American policy is how sick the society is and how unfirm it is and how determined the Trumpites are to do what they think is military requirements to win the next election. You cannot shake that tree if you're outside it, at war with it. A war making in the Ukraine means shaking the tree in a slightly different way. And we agree that the shaking of the tree that's required involves different tactics from the Russian side towards France, towards Germany, towards Finland, towards Poland, and so on. But if we're facing long-term war, shaking now is not what we can do as a war strategy. It's what we can do as a tactic.
Right. I think we've had a fascinating 1 hour of discussion on many issues. And I'll get back to India. And I'll conclude this whole story with what is it for India at the end of the day. We've heard the Russian viewpoint. We've heard Brig Arun Sahgal's viewpoint, right? A viewpoint. But I'll sum it up. Look, what do I see? The way I look at it, and which I've been stressing in all my podcasts. We see in India, and I'm quoting what my Prime Minister said, India which is stable politically, demographically vibrant, economically robust, growing at the highest growth rates. After all, in the last quarter, we clocked a phenomenal growth rate of 7.8% GDP, which no other country can touch us or come anywhere near us. In terms of science, we have the velocity. We also have the momentum here in India. And that's something which we need to understand. Geopolitically, India is in a sweet spot on many issues. But it faces problems. It faces a problem with USA. USA till yesterday was our strategic partner. Today, it is neither strategic nor partnership with USA. It is only a relationship. That relationship has developed over 25 years and it is quite deep. And it has a momentum of its own. Certain parts of this relationship are going ahead, where certain parts of this relationship are regressing back. So it's a new paradigm we are entering, on which both USA and India both are not sure. The tariffs are only momentary in this whole story. Right. When you look at China, we've had a very adversarial relationship with China over the past 75 years. Right. That's not going to change overnight. There might be some, incremental steps which we will get with China. But to think that we're going to have a great trade relationship with them in a hurry is also probably misplaced. But we will have to open up our trade. That's our requirement. The requirement is there, but here the difficulty is to how to take it forward. We've had a terrific relationship with Russia, which I think India values quite a bit, and so does Russia. And we've been giving each other a lot of guarantees through, political or geopolitical alignment with each other. It's not now; it's built over a long time. But yet, as an Indian, I feel that Russia is also handicapped by its own problems at this point of time. There are many, right? Now, it is in this context, what does India do? Right? We can't stop our growth. We can't stop where we are going. So there is, and between these three, USA, Russia, and China, there are their own pulls and pushes, and their relationships are also changing internally and externally, and there's a whole new dynamism today internationally. So India has to turn towards Japan, Germany, Brazil, EU, Singapore, Philippines, and the Middle East. Why have I quoted these? I have quoted this because these very countries and regions are quoting India. It's right. For example, yesterday the Prime Minister of Singapore was here. Day before yesterday, the Foreign Minister of Germany was here. 1 month back, the President of Philippines was here. Yes, yesterday late night, the European Commission got into touch with us, right? And the Middle East has always been there. And some time back, the President of Brazil also got in touch with India, and and in fact, probably next month, the Vice President of Brazil is going to come to India for negotiations. So India finds itself in a new paradigm completely, and this paradigm has to be handled with care, because let's be very frank, so far we have not faced such a situation. We are stepping out of the shadows of many alignments and thought processes and everything. Or diplomacy has to gear up, or government has to gear up. The big question going ahead is, can our government come up to speed to handle this? Even for those countries who are handling India, it's going to be a new affair, because they have not seen a India which handles things this way or is capable of handling things this way. So this is where I leave the whole thing. I'd like to thank, and we'll see many more interesting dialogues going ahead. Right. With this, I'd like to thank Dr. John Helmer and Brig Arun Sahgal for having joined me. And thanks a lot, gentlemen. You generated a lot of interesting thought processes, and we'll carry it forward next time. With this, thank you and
Thank
have a great day.